Sarah Martinez wiped the sweat from her forehead as she adjusted the rifle scope one more time. The morning sun cast long shadows across the military training ground, and the sound of boots marching in formation echoed in the distance. At 22 years old, she stood barely 5 feet 4 inches tall, but her steady hands and sharp eyes had already earned her respect among her fellow soldiers. Today would be different, though. Today, she would face the biggest challenge of her military career. The shooting range stretched out before her like a long corridor of dreams and nightmares. Targets stood at various distances, from 50 yards to 800 yards, each one representing a step toward proving herself in a world that constantly questioned her abilities. Sarah had grown up on a farm in rural Texas, where her father taught her to shoot tin cans off fence posts when she was just 8 years old. Back then, it was just fun between a father and daughter. Now, it had become her pathway to respect and recognition. "Martinez," Sergeant Jackson's voice boomed across the range. "You're up for qualification rounds today. Hope you brought your A-game because the general himself is coming to observe." Sarah's stomach tightened. General Morrison was known throughout the base as a tough, old-school military leader who believed certain roles were better suited for men. She had heard the whispers around the base cafeteria and in the barracks. Some soldiers supported her, but others made no secret of their belief that women had no business in combat roles, especially not as marksmen. She picked up her M24 rifle, a weapon she had come to know, as well as her own heartbeat. Every scratch on the stock, every adjustment on the scope, every part of its mechanism was familiar to her touch. During the past 6 months of intensive training, this rifle had become an extension of her body. She had practiced in rain, wind, blazing heat, and freezing cold. She had learned to control her breathing, steady her pulse, and block out every distraction around her. The other candidates were gathering for the qualification test, 12 soldiers in total, all competing for 3 spots in the elite sniper unit. Sarah looked around at her competition. Most were men who towered over her, with broad shoulders and confident grins. They had grown up playing war games, watching action movies, and dreaming of military glory. Many came from military families where service was a tradition passed down through generations. "Look who showed up," whispered Corporal Davis, a tall man from Alabama with a thick accent and an even thicker attitude. "Hope she doesn't cry when she misses the broad side of a barn." Private Johnson laughed. "Maybe she can cook for us after she washes out. I heard women are good at that." Sarah had learned to ignore such comments, but they still stung. She thought about her younger sister back home, who looked up to her and wanted to follow in her footsteps. She thought about all the girls who might one day want to serve their country but would be told they were not strong enough, not tough enough, not good enough. This moment was bigger than just her own dreams. Master Sergeant Williams approached the group. He was a fair man who judged soldiers by their performance, not their gender. "Listen up, everyone. Today's qualification will determine who moves forward to advanced sniper training. You'll be shooting at distances from 100 to 800 yards, in various conditions, with different scenarios. Weather is perfect today, so you have no excuses." The first test involved shooting at stationary targets from prone position. Sarah lay down on the dirt, feeling the familiar weight of the rifle against her shoulder. She controlled her breathing, letting her heart rate settle into a calm rhythm. The target seemed tiny at 200 yards, but she had hit smaller targets in training. She squeezed the trigger slowly, feeling the rifle's recoil as the bullet left the barrel. Through the scope, she watched the bullet strike dead center. A perfect hit. The spotter called out, "Center mass," and Sarah allowed herself a small smile. One by one, the other candidates took their shots. Some hit the target. Others missed completely. The pressure was building as each shooter finished their round. Sarah noticed that several of the men were struggling with the distance shots. Their bullets scattered around the target like raindrops on a window. The second test required shooting at moving targets. Clay pigeons would be launched at different angles and speeds, simulating real combat situations. This was where Sarah's farm background gave her an advantage. She had spent countless hours hunting wild birds with her father, learning to track movement and predict flight patterns. "Martinez, you're up," Sergeant Jackson called. Sarah took position and watched as the first clay pigeon was launched. It arced through the air like a small orange frisbee. She followed its path, led it slightly to account for its movement, and fired. The clay exploded into dust. Perfect hit. 4 more pigeons were launched in quick succession. Sarah hit them all, her movements smooth and confident. The other soldiers watched in amazement as she shattered target after target without hesitation. "Holy cow," she heard someone whisper. "She's actually good at this." The morning progressed through various shooting scenarios: long-distance precision shots, rapid-fire accuracy tests, shooting from different positions, and even shooting while wearing a gas mask to simulate chemical warfare conditions. With each test, Sarah proved that her size and gender had no bearing on her shooting ability. During the lunch break, Sarah sat alone under a tree, cleaning her rifle and reviewing her performance. She had performed well, but she knew the afternoon would bring even greater challenges. The rumor was that General Morrison would arrive for the final test, and that test would determine who made it to the elite unit. Corporal Davis approached her, his earlier mockery replaced by grudging respect. "Hey Martinez, where'd you learn to shoot like that?" "My father taught me," Sarah replied, not looking up from her rifle. "Started when I was 8 years old." "Well, I'll admit I was wrong about you. You've got skills." Davis sat down nearby. "But you know the general is old school, right? He might not be as impressed as the rest of us." Sarah nodded. She had heard the stories about General Morrison. He had served in 3 wars and believed strongly in traditional military roles. Women could serve as medics, communications specialists, and support staff, but combat roles were for men. He had never hidden his opinion on the matter. "That's his problem, not mine," Sarah said, finally looking up. "I can outshoot most of the men on this base, and I'll prove it this afternoon." The afternoon session began with an announcement that made everyone straighten their backs. "Attention! General Morrison will be observing the final qualification round. This test will determine which 3 candidates advance to sniper school. You'll be shooting at 800 yards in windy conditions. Each candidate gets 3 shots. Best total score wins." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. 800 yards was a significant distance, and the wind had picked up since morning. Small flags along the range showed gusts coming from different directions, making shot placement extremely challenging. General Morrison arrived in a black military vehicle, stepping out with the bearing of a man who had commanded respect for 30 years. He was tall and stern, with gray hair and steel-blue eyes that seemed to evaluate everything around him. He spoke briefly with the range officers, then took a position where he could observe each shooter. The candidates drew numbers to determine shooting order. Sarah drew number 11, meaning she would shoot second to last. This gave her the advantage of watching others deal with the wind conditions, but also meant the pressure would build as she waited. The first shooter was Private Thompson, a young man from Montana who had bragged about hunting elk in the mountains. He took position, aimed carefully, and fired his first shot. The spotter called out, "Miss. Left side." The wind had pushed his bullet off target. His second shot hit the outer ring of the target, and his third shot missed completely. Thompson walked away, shaking his head in frustration. One by one, the other shooters took their turns. The wind was proving to be a major factor. Even experienced shooters were struggling to compensate for the gusts that seemed to change direction between shots. By the time 10 shooters had finished, only 2 had managed to hit the center ring, and no one had achieved a perfect score. "Martinez, you're up," Sergeant Jackson's voice carried across the range. Sarah approached the firing line, aware that all eyes were on her, especially General Morrison's. She could feel the weight of everyone's expectations, doubts, and curiosities. This was her moment to prove that ability mattered more than assumptions. She lay down in the prone position and began her routine. First, she studied the wind flags, noting the patterns and timing of the gusts. Then she adjusted her scope for the 800-yard distance, accounting for bullet drop and wind drift. She controlled her breathing, letting her heart rate slow to a calm, steady rhythm. Through her scope, the target looked incredibly small. At 800 yards, the center ring appeared no bigger than a quarter, held at arm's length. Sarah watched the wind flags for a full minute, learning the pattern of gusts. She noticed that every 30 to 40 seconds, there was a brief lull in the wind. She waited for the next lull, took a deep breath, let it out halfway, and squeezed the trigger. The rifle recoiled against her shoulder, and through the scope, she watched the bullet's impact. Dead center, perfect hit. A murmur rippled through the observers. Even General Morrison raised an eyebrow, though his expression remained stern and unreadable. Sarah reloaded and prepared for her second shot. The wind had picked up again, but she had learned its pattern. She waited for another lull, made a tiny adjustment to account for a slight crosswind, and fired again. Another perfect center hit. The range fell silent except for the sound of wind through the flags. Sarah had achieved 2 perfect hits at 800 yards in challenging conditions. Her final shot would determine whether she scored better than anyone else that day. She reloaded methodically, refusing to let excitement or nerves affect her technique. The wind seemed to be getting stronger, but she had confidence in her ability to read the conditions. She studied the flags one more time, noting that the pattern had changed slightly. The lulls were now coming every 20 to 30 seconds. Sarah waited, controlling her breathing and keeping her heart rate steady. When the wind flags drooped, indicating a brief calm, she took her shot. Through the scope, she watched as the bullet struck the exact center of the target, splitting the previous bullet hole. The range erupted in cheers and applause. Even some of the soldiers who had doubted her were clapping and shaking their heads in amazement. 3 perfect shots at 800 yards in windy conditions was an exceptional performance by any standard. General Morrison walked down to the firing line, his boots crunching on the gravel. The entire range fell silent as he approached Sarah, who was still lying in the prone position with her rifle. "Stand up, soldier," he said in a voice that carried the authority of decades of command. Sarah stood at attention, her rifle held properly across her chest. She looked directly into the general's steel blue eyes, showing respect, but not backing down from his intimidating presence. "That was some impressive shooting, Martinez," the general said, his voice giving no indication of his thoughts. "Where did you learn to handle a rifle like that?" "Sir, my father taught me to shoot on our farm in Texas. I've been practicing since I was 8 years old, sir." General Morrison studied her for a long moment. The entire range watched in tense silence, waiting to see how he would react. Everyone knew his reputation for traditional military thinking, and many expected him to find some reason to dismiss her performance. 8 years old, he repeated, nodding slowly. "And how long have you been in the service, Martinez?" 2 years, sir. I enlisted straight out of high school. Why did you want to become a marksman, soldier? Sarah had prepared for this question. But standing before the general, she decided to speak from her heart, rather than give a rehearsed answer. "Sir, I want to serve my country to the best of my ability. I believe my skills can make a difference. And I want to prove that determination and ability matter more than assumptions about what women can or cannot do, sir." The general continued to study her, and Sarah could see him weighing her words. Around them, the other soldiers waited nervously for his verdict. This moment would determine not just Sarah's future, but potentially the future of other women who wanted to serve in combat roles. Finally, General Morrison spoke. "Martinez, in 30 years of military service, I've seen a lot of soldiers come and go. I've seen men who looked like warriors but couldn't hit a target at 50 yards. I've seen small soldiers outperform big ones, and quiet soldiers outperform loud ones." He paused, and Sarah held her breath. What I just witnessed was exceptional marksmanship under pressure. 3 perfect shots at 800 yards in challenging wind conditions. That's the kind of shooting that saves lives and wins battles. The general turned to address the entire group. "Let me be clear to all of you. This soldier has just demonstrated the highest level of marksmanship I've seen on this range in 5 years. She has earned her place through skill, dedication, and performance under pressure." Sarah felt relief wash over her, but she maintained her military bearing. She had proven herself, but she knew this was just the beginning. Making it into the elite sniper unit would bring new challenges and new opportunities to prove herself. "Martinez," the general continued, "you'll report to Advanced Sniper School next month. Don't make me regret this decision." "No, sir. I won't let you down, sir." As the general walked away, Sarah allowed herself to smile. She had faced the skeptics, overcome the challenges, and proved that skill mattered more than gender. But she also knew that this victory was just the first step in a longer journey to gain full acceptance and respect in her chosen field. The other soldiers began congratulating her, including some who had doubted her earlier. Corporal Davis approached with a grin. "Martinez, I owe you an apology. That was some of the finest shooting I've ever seen." "Thanks, Davis. But this is just the beginning. Sniper school is going to be even tougher. If today is any indication, you'll do just fine," Davis replied. "You've got the skills and the heart for this job." As Sarah cleaned her rifle and gathered her gear, she thought about the phone call she would make to her family that evening. Her father would be proud but not surprised. He had always believed in her abilities. Her mother would worry, as mothers do, but would support her daughter's choices. Her younger sister would be excited and inspired, seeing proof that women could achieve anything they set their minds to. The sun was setting over the training ground as Sarah walked back to the barracks. She had faced her critics, overcome the challenges, and earned her place through pure skill and determination. General Morrison's acceptance meant more than just personal validation. It represented a crack in the wall of tradition that might allow other women to follow in her footsteps. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities to prove herself. Sniper school would test not just her marksmanship, but her physical endurance, mental toughness, and ability to work as part of a team. She would face instructors who might doubt her abilities, fellow students who might resent her presence, and training scenarios that would push her to her limits. But tonight, Sarah Martinez could go to sleep knowing that she had proven something important. When they said females don't make marksmen, she had answered with 3 perfect shots that split the center ring right in front of the general. And that was just the beginning of her story. The bus carrying Sarah and 11 other soldiers wound through the mountains of Georgia, heading toward the most challenging military training facility in the country. Fort Benning's sniper school had a reputation that made even veteran soldiers nervous. Only 30% of candidates successfully completed the course, and those who failed often left questioning their abilities as soldiers. Sarah stared out the window at the dense forest that would become her classroom for the next 10 weeks. The trees seemed to whisper stories of the thousands of soldiers who had trained here before her. Some had become legends in the military community, while others had washed out after just a few days. She wondered which category she would fall into. Sitting across from her was Corporal Mike Stevens, a soft-spoken soldier from Oregon, who had qualified second highest at the selection range. Next to him sat Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, a combat veteran with 3 tours overseas who spoke little but observed everything. The atmosphere on the bus was tense, with each soldier lost in their own thoughts about the challenges ahead. "First time at sniper school, Martinez?" asked Private First Class Johnson, a young soldier from North Carolina who had barely made the cut during qualifications. "First time," Sarah replied. "How about you?" "Same here. I've heard horror stories about the instructors. They say Sergeant Major Thompson once made a guy crawl through a swamp for 6 hours because he forgot to clean his rifle properly." Rodriguez looked up from the manual he was studying. "The instructors aren't here to be your friends. They're here to prepare you for situations where one shot might mean the difference between your team coming home alive or in body bags." The bus pulled through the gates of the training facility, and Sarah got her first glimpse of what would be her home for the next 10 weeks. The buildings were simple and functional, surrounded by various training areas that included obstacle courses, shooting ranges, and dense forest areas. Everything looked designed to test soldiers to their absolute limits. As they unloaded their gear, a tall, intimidating figure approached. Sergeant Major Thompson was exactly what Sarah had imagined from the stories she had heard. He stood 6 feet, 6 inches tall, with the build of a man who had spent decades staying in perfect physical condition. His voice carried the authority of someone who had trained thousands of soldiers and had zero tolerance for weakness. "Welcome to sniper school, candidates," he announced in a voice that could cut steel. "For the next 10 weeks, you will be tested physically, mentally, and emotionally. Most of you will fail. Some of you will quit. A few of you might actually become snipers." His eyes scanned the group and settled on Sarah for a moment longer than the others. She met his gaze without flinching. showing the same determination that had carried her through the qualification rounds. "Martinez," he called out. "Step forward." Sarah's heart pounded as she approached the sergeant major. Every candidate was watching, wondering if he was about to make an example of her before training even began. "I've heard about your performance at qualifications," Thompson said, his voice giving no indication of whether he was impressed or skeptical. 3 perfect shots at 800 yards in wind. That's the kind of shooting that gets attention. "Thank you, Sergeant Major." "Don't thank me yet, soldier." Hitting targets on a calm day with observers watching is different from hitting targets when you're exhausted, stressed, and operating in hostile territory. "We'll see if you can maintain that level of performance when it really matters." Thompson turned to address the entire group. "Your first lesson begins now. Notice anything different about this candidate?" Several soldiers glanced at Sarah, unsure how to respond. The sergeant major waited, letting the silence stretch uncomfortably. "She's the only woman in the group," finally said Stevens. "Correct. And do you know why that matters?" Thompson asked. "It doesn't, Sergeant Major," Sarah answered before anyone else could speak. "My performance should be judged the same as any other candidate." Thompson smiled slightly, the first hint of approval Sarah had seen from him. "Correct again, Martinez. Gender doesn't matter in this program. Performance matters. Results matter. Your ability to make accurate shots under pressure matters. Everything else is just noise." He led the group to their barracks, a simple building with 12 bunks and minimal amenities. "You'll have 30 minutes to settle in. Then we begin with physical fitness testing. Anyone who can't meet the minimum standards will be on the next bus home." Sarah chose a bunk near the window and began organizing her gear. The other candidates did the same. Everyone focused on preparing for the challenges ahead. The competitive atmosphere was obvious, but Sarah sensed that some of her fellow candidates were willing to offer mutual support and encouragement. The physical fitness test began with a 5-mile run through hilly terrain. Sarah had always been a strong runner, and her smaller size actually gave her an advantage on the uphill sections. She finished 3rd overall, behind Rodriguez and a tall soldier named Captain Williams, who had been a college track athlete. Next came strength testing, including push-ups, pull-ups, and carrying heavy equipment over obstacle courses. This was where Sarah's size became a disadvantage. She struggled with some of the strength requirements, particularly carrying a wounded soldier simulation that weighed more than she did. Sergeant Major Thompson observed every aspect of the testing, making notes on his clipboard. When Sarah struggled with the casualty carry exercise, he approached and watched her technique. "You're fighting the weight instead of using leverage," he told her. "In real situations, you might need to move a wounded teammate who weighs twice as much as you do. Figure out how to use technique instead of relying on strength you don't have." Sarah adjusted her approach, using her legs more effectively and finding better balance points. She completed the exercise, though it took longer than some of the larger candidates. That evening, the instructors gathered the candidates for their first classroom session. The walls were covered with maps, photographs of various terrains, and technical specifications for different rifle systems. This was where Sarah felt most comfortable, as the academic aspects of marksmanship had always come easily to her. "Effective sniping requires more than just accurate shooting," explained Staff Sergeant Martinez, one of the assistant instructors. "You need to understand ballistics, weather effects, target identification, camouflage, stalking, and field craft. You'll also learn about mission planning, communication, and operating as part of a 2-person sniper team." The first week of training was designed to test basic competencies and eliminate candidates who lacked the fundamental skills needed for advanced training. Sarah excelled in the classroom portions, quickly grasping complex ballistic calculations and demonstrating strong knowledge of rifle systems and optics. The shooting portions were more challenging than she had expected. The ranges were longer than anything she had experienced before, and the conditions were deliberately difficult. Instructors would create distractions during shooting exercises, including loud noises, smoke, and time pressure designed to simulate combat stress. During one exercise, Candidates had to engage targets at various distances while wearing full combat gear and operating on minimal sleep. Sarah had been awake for over 20 hours when she took position for her shots. Her hands trembled slightly from exhaustion, and her eyes burned from fatigue. Target at 600 yards, multiple hostiles, friendly forces in the area, called out the instructor. You have 90 seconds to identify and engage the correct target. Through her scope, Sarah could see several human-shaped targets scattered across the range. Some were marked as friendly forces, others as hostile. Missing the distinction could mean failing the exercise or, in real combat, accidentally harming innocent civilians or friendly troops. She studied the targets carefully, noting the subtle differences in uniforms and equipment that distinguished friend from foe. Her training had taught her to look for specific details, weapon types, uniform colors, equipment configurations, and positioning that would help identify threats. Sarah identified her target, controlled her breathing despite her exhaustion, and took the shot. The bullet struck center mass on the correct hostile target. She quickly identified and engaged 2 additional targets within the time limit, achieving perfect accuracy while avoiding the friendly forces. Good shooting, Martinez, acknowledged Sergeant Major Thompson. Maintaining accuracy while exhausted is a critical skill that separates real snipers from target shooters. As the first week progressed, 3 candidates had already washed out of the program. One failed the physical fitness standards, another couldn't maintain accuracy under stress, and a third quit after struggling with the academic requirements. Sarah was performing well overall, though she continued to face challenges with some of the physical demands. The second week introduced fieldcraft training, teaching candidates how to move unseen through various terrains and establish concealed shooting positions. This was completely new territory for Sarah, who had learned marksmanship on open ranges and farm fields. Learning to disappear into forest environments required an entirely different set of skills. In real combat situations, being invisible is often more important than being able to shoot, explained Instructor Staff Sergeant Collins. The best shot in the world won't help you if the enemy spots you before you can engage your target. The camouflage training began with basics, understanding how to use natural materials to break up human silhouettes, learning to move without creating noise, and developing patience to remain motionless for hours at a time. Sarah discovered that her smaller size was actually an advantage for concealment, as she required less space to hide effectively. During one exercise, candidates had to stalk to within 200 yards of an observation post without being detected, then engage a target. The exercise could take anywhere from 4 to 8 hours, depending on terrain conditions and the candidate's skill level. Sarah spent nearly 6 hours slowly moving through dense forest, carefully placing each step to avoid snapping twigs or rustling leaves. She had to cross a small stream without creating ripples and navigate through thick undergrowth without disturbing the vegetation in ways that might reveal her passage. When she finally reached her shooting position, she was covered in mud, leaves, and natural camouflage materials. She had learned to embrace the discomfort and focus entirely on the mission objectives. Through her scope, she could see the target clearly at the designated distance. She took her shot and achieved a perfect hit, then had to remain concealed while instructors searched for her position. For another hour, she lay perfectly still as staff members walked within feet of her hiding spot. Only when they called "Exercise complete" did she reveal her position. "Outstanding fieldcraft, Martinez," said Sergeant Major Thompson. "You moved like smoke through those woods. That's the kind of stealth that keeps snipers alive." The third week brought team training, pairing candidates together to function as sniper teams. Sarah was paired with Corporal Stevens, the quiet soldier from Oregon, who had proven to be reliable and methodical in his approach to training. "In the field, you'll never operate alone," explained Instructor Martinez. "One sniper acts as the shooter, the other as the spotter. You'll alternate roles and need to develop complete trust in each other." Working with Stevens proved to be ideal for Sarah. He had a calm personality that complemented her more intense approach, and his background in hunting elk in mountain terrain gave him excellent observation skills. Together, they developed an efficient communication system and learned to coordinate their movements seamlessly. Their first major team exercise involved a simulated mission to eliminate a high-value target in a fortified position. The scenario required them to stalk to within 400 yards of a building, identify the correct target among several people, and make a clean shot without alerting security forces. Sarah and Stevens spent 2 hours planning their approach, studying aerial photographs, and identifying potential shooting positions. They decided that Stevens would act as spotter while Sarah took the shot, as her marksmanship had proven to be slightly more consistent under pressure. The stalk took 3 hours through challenging terrain that included open ground, forest, and urban environments. They had to time their movements to avoid simulated security patrols and establish their position without being detected by role players acting as guards. When they reached their shooting position, Stevens used his spotting scope to identify the target, while Sarah prepared her rifle. They had to wait nearly an hour for the target to appear in a window, testing their patience and ability to maintain focus. Target identified. Window on second floor. Range 420 yards. Slight crosswind from the east. Stevens whispered. Sarah made the necessary adjustments to her scope, controlled her breathing, and waited for Stevens to confirm the shot. Wind, calm. Target stationary. Clear shot, Stevens confirmed. Sarah squeezed the trigger. And through her scope, she watched the simulated target react to being hit. Perfect shot placement. Mission accomplished. Excellent work, team, radioed Sergeant Major Thompson. Clean shot. Proper target identification, and perfect concealment throughout the mission. As the weeks progressed, the training became increasingly complex and demanding. Candidates learned to operate in all weather conditions, including rain, snow, and extreme heat. They practiced shooting at moving targets, engaging multiple targets in sequence, and making shots at extreme distances approaching 1,000 yards. Sarah's performance continued to improve with each week of training. Her marksmanship remained consistently excellent, and she had adapted well to the physical demands of fieldcraft and stalking. More importantly, she had gained the respect of her fellow candidates and instructors through her dedication and professionalism. During the 6th week, the candidates faced their most challenging exercise yet, a 3-day field exercise that combined all the skills they had learned. Working in teams, they had to navigate to multiple target areas, engage various threats, and complete their missions while operating with minimal food and sleep. Sarah and Stevens were assigned a mission that required them to move 12 miles through mountainous terrain, establish observation of a simulated enemy facility, gather intelligence for 24 hours, and then eliminate specific targets before extracting to a pickup point. The mission began at midnight, in cold, rainy conditions that made movement treacherous and visibility poor. Carrying full combat loads, including rifles, ammunition, camouflage materials, food, water, and communication equipment, the team began their movement toward the target area. 6 hours into the mission, they had covered 8 miles and were exhausted from navigating rough terrain in darkness. Sarah's feet were blistered. Her shoulders ached from the heavy pack, and she was thoroughly soaked from the rain. But she maintained focus on the mission objectives and continued pushing forward. "How are you holding up?" Stevens whispered during a brief rest break. "I'm fine," Sarah replied, though every muscle in her body was screaming for rest. "How much farther to the observation point?" "About 4 more miles, but the terrain gets steeper." "Are you sure you're okay?" Sarah appreciated Stevens' concern, but she was determined to complete the mission without requiring any accommodation for her smaller size or the physical challenges she faced. "I've got this, Mike. Let's keep moving." They reached their observation point just as dawn was breaking over the mountains. The simulated enemy facility was a collection of buildings in a valley below, with role players acting as guards and various personnel moving around the area. Sarah and Stevens established a concealed position that gave them clear observation of all buildings while keeping them hidden from view. For the next 24 hours, they maintained constant surveillance, documenting personnel movements, identifying key targets, and planning their shooting positions for the final phase of the mission. They took turns sleeping in 2-hour shifts, while one maintained watch. The weather remained cold and wet throughout the surveillance period, making their concealment even more challenging. Sarah learned to ignore her discomfort and focus entirely on gathering the intelligence they needed to complete their mission successfully. On the final day of the exercise, they received radio confirmation to engage their targets. Sarah had identified 3 specific individuals who matched the descriptions in their mission briefing. She would need to eliminate all 3 targets within a 5-minute window to prevent the remaining personnel from identifying their position. Stevens acted as spotter while Sarah prepared for the most challenging shooting of her military career. The targets were at different distances ranging from 300 to 500 yards, and she would need to move between 2 different shooting positions to get clear shots at all 3. First target identified, 350 yards. Walking between buildings, Stevens whispered. Sarah acquired the target through her scope, made adjustments for the distance and wind conditions, and waited for the optimal shot opportunity. When the target paused in an open area, she took her shot. Perfect hit. Target down. Move to position 2, Stevens confirmed. They quickly moved to their second shooting position, remaining concealed while repositioning for the next engagement. Sarah's heart was racing from exertion and adrenaline, but she forced herself to calm down and focus on the next shot. Second target identified. 420 yards. Standing near the main building, Stevens spotted. Sarah acquired this target, made the necessary scope adjustments, and prepared for a slightly longer shot. The target was partially concealed by a building corner, requiring precise shot placement. She controlled her breathing, waited for the target to move into the clear, and fired. Another perfect hit. Target down, moving for final engagement, Stevens confirmed. The third target required them to move to a completely different position, as buildings blocked their view from their current location. They had to move quickly while maintaining concealment, as the simulated enemy forces would be reacting to the previous shots. Sarah's legs burned with fatigue as they rushed to the final shooting position. 3 days of minimal sleep, constant stress, and physical exertion had pushed her body to its limits, but she knew this final shot would determine whether they successfully completed one of the most important exercises of the entire course. Final target identified. 500 yards. Moving toward a vehicle. Stevens called out urgently. This was the longest shot of the mission, and Sarah had to account for additional bullet drop and wind drift at the extended distance. The target was moving, which required her to lead the shot and predict where the person would be when the bullet arrived. Sarah tracked the target's movement through her scope, calculated the lead distance, and fired just as the person approached the vehicle. Through the scope, she watched the target react to being hit just as they reached for the vehicle door. Mission complete. All targets engaged successfully, Stevens confirmed. Sarah felt a surge of pride and relief as they began their movement to the extraction point. She had proven to herself and her instructors that she could perform under the most challenging conditions possible. 3 perfect shots across varying distances while exhausted, stressed, and operating in hostile conditions. The extraction required another 4-mile movement to reach the pickup point, but Sarah barely noticed the physical discomfort. She had passed one of the most difficult tests of the course and was one step closer to earning her place as a qualified military sniper. When they reached the extraction point, Sergeant Major Thompson was waiting with a military vehicle. His expression was unreadable as Sarah and Stevens approached, but she could see approval in his eyes. Outstanding mission execution, he told them. 3 targets engaged successfully. Perfect concealment throughout the operation. And professional teamwork under pressure. That's the kind of performance that saves lives in real combat situations. As they drove back to the training facility, Sarah allowed herself to smile. She had survived another week of the most challenging military training in the world, and she was proving that gender had no bearing on ability to perform under pressure. But she also knew that the hardest challenges were still ahead. Week 7 arrived with an announcement that made every remaining candidate nervous. Only 8 soldiers had survived the training so far, and now they faced the most feared portion of the entire course: urban warfare and hostage rescue scenarios. Unlike forest operations where mistakes might mean failure, urban scenarios carried simulated consequences that reflected real-world situations where innocent lives hung in the balance. Sarah had never imagined she would be crawling through mock city streets, learning to distinguish between terrorists and civilians in split-second decisions. The training facility's urban warfare area looked like a small town, complete with apartment buildings, shops, schools, and even a hospital. Role players acted as both hostiles and innocent civilians, creating scenarios that tested not just marksmanship, but judgment under extreme pressure. Urban sniping is the most complex challenge you'll face, explained Master Sergeant Rodriguez, a veteran of urban combat operations in Iraq and Afghanistan. In the mountains or forest, you're usually shooting at confirmed enemy targets. In cities, every shot must account for innocent people who might be in the line of fire. The first exercise involved a hostage situation in a 3-story apartment building. Intelligence reports indicated that armed terrorists were holding civilians on the second floor, while other residents remained trapped throughout the building. Sarah's mission was to provide overwatch and eliminate specific threats without endangering the hostages or other civilians. Working with Stevens as her spotter, Sarah established a shooting position on a rooftop 400 yards away from the target building. Through her scope, she could see movement in various windows, but distinguishing between hostiles and hostages required careful observation and patience. Movement in the second-floor window. Possible hostile with a rifle, Stevens whispered, using his high-powered spotting scope to get a clearer view. Sarah acquired the target through her scope, but she could also see what appeared to be a civilian crouching near the same window. The shot angle was complex, requiring her to hit the hostile without any risk of the bullet over-penetrating and striking the innocent person. "I need a better angle," Sarah told Stevens. "Too much risk of collateral damage from this position." They relocated to a different rooftop, spending precious time moving while the simulated crisis continued. Time pressure was a constant factor in urban scenarios, as real hostage situations could change rapidly, and innocent people could die if snipers took too long to neutralize threats. From the new position, Sarah had a clearer shot angle that eliminated the risk to civilians. She watched through her scope as the role player acting as a terrorist moved to a window with a simulated rifle, apparently preparing to fire at police forces below. "Clear shot. No civilians in line of fire," Stevens confirmed. Sarah controlled her breathing, made minute adjustments to account for the urban wind patterns that were different from open terrain, and fired. The shot struck the target precisely, and the role player immediately signaled that he was eliminated. "Target down. Good shot," confirmed the exercise controller over the radio. But the scenario was far from over. Intelligence reports indicated multiple hostiles throughout the building, and Sarah would need to engage several more targets while avoiding any harm to the innocent people scattered throughout the same areas. The second target appeared in a ground-floor window, but this shot presented an even greater challenge. The hostile was standing directly behind a hostage, using the innocent person as a human shield. Only a small portion of the terrorist's head was visible, requiring incredible precision to make a clean shot without endangering the hostage. "Extremely difficult shot," Stevens observed. "Target is using the hostage as cover. Only partial headshot available." Sarah studied the target through her scope. In real combat, this type of shot would be authorized only if it was the last resort to save the hostage's life. The margin for error was essentially zero, as any miss could kill an innocent person. "I can make the shot," Sarah told Stevens. "The angle gives me about 3 inches of target area." She steadied her rifle, controlling not just her breathing but her heartbeat, as even the slight movement from her pulse could affect accuracy at this level of precision. The target moved slightly, giving her a clearer shot angle for just a few seconds. Sarah fired, and the bullet struck the hostile precisely where she had aimed. The role player acting as the terrorist immediately signaled elimination, while the hostage remained completely unharmed. "Outstanding shot, Martinez," came the voice of Master Sergeant Rodriguez over the radio. "That's the kind of precision that saves innocent lives." The exercise continued for 2 more hours, with Sarah successfully engaging 5 different targets while protecting numerous civilians throughout the building. Each shot required different considerations: bullet angles, backdrop safety, timing to avoid civilian movement, and shot placement that would instantly neutralize threats without risking collateral damage. When the exercise concluded, the instructors gathered all candidates for an immediate debrief. Urban warfare scenarios were considered so critical that detailed analysis occurred immediately after each exercise while the decisions and stress factors were still fresh in everyone's minds. "Martinez," Master Sergeant Rodriguez addressed her directly. "Walk us through your decision-making process for the human shield shot." Sarah stood and faced her fellow candidates and instructors. Master Sergeant, I analyzed the shot angle and determined that the terrorist's head position gave me approximately 3 inches of target area. The hostage was positioned lower and to the left, so bullet trajectory would clear them even in case of minor deflection. I waited for the optimal moment when the target moved to give me the clearest shot angle. And if you had missed? Rodriguez asked. Master Sergeant, I was confident in the shot based on the target size and range. However, if I had any doubt about the shot, I would have waited for a better opportunity or requested permission to reposition for a safer angle. Rodriguez nodded approvingly. Correct answer. In real operations, sniper shots in urban environments require split-second decisions that can determine whether innocent people live or die. Confidence in your abilities must be balanced with responsibility for consequences. The second urban exercise took place in a school setting, one of the most emotionally challenging scenarios any sniper could face. The situation involved armed intruders in a building full of children, requiring Sarah to make precise shots while surrounded by the most vulnerable, innocent people imaginable. Sarah found this exercise particularly difficult, not because of the technical shooting requirements, but because of the emotional weight of the scenario. Even though she knew it was training with role players, the thought of children in danger affected her in ways that military target scenarios never had. Stay focused on the technical aspects, Stevens advised, recognizing that Sarah was struggling with the emotional component. These scenarios are designed to test your ability to perform under psychological pressure. The first target was a role player positioned in a classroom doorway, simulating an armed intruder threatening students inside. Sarah could see children hiding under desks through the classroom windows, making the target identification process even more critical. Through her scope, she watched the simulated intruder move around the classroom, apparently threatening the children inside. When he positioned himself near a window, Sarah had a clear shot that would eliminate the threat without any risk to the students. She fired and achieved a perfect hit, but the exercise controllers immediately announced a new development. Additional hostile reported in the gymnasium, children evacuating through that area. Sarah and Stevens had to quickly reposition to get visual on the gymnasium, where another role player was simulating an active threat to evacuating children. This target was moving rapidly, requiring Sarah to make a quick shot on a moving target in a crowded environment. The technical challenge of hitting a moving target was complicated by the emotional pressure of knowing that children's lives depended on her accuracy. Sarah forced herself to focus on her training, treating it as a technical problem rather than an emotional situation. She tracked the target's movement, led the shot appropriately, and fired when the hostile was clear of any civilians. Another perfect hit, and the simulated threat was eliminated. The school scenario concluded with Sarah successfully engaging 4 different targets while protecting dozens of simulated students and teachers. Her shooting had been flawless, but she found herself emotionally drained in a way that previous exercises had never affected her. These scenarios are tough on everyone, Stevens told her afterward. The instructors use them to see how candidates handle psychological pressure, not just physical and technical challenges. Week 8 brought advanced ballistics training, teaching candidates to make shots at extreme distances where atmospheric conditions, Earth's rotation, and even temperature could affect bullet trajectory. Sarah discovered that shooting beyond 800 yards required knowledge that went far beyond basic marksmanship. At distances approaching 1,000 yards, you need to account for factors that don't matter at shorter ranges, explained Instructor Staff Sergeant Williams. Temperature affects bullet velocity, humidity affects air density, and even the rotation of the Earth can influence bullet path over very long distances. Sarah found herself spending hours with ballistics, computers, learning to calculate shooting solutions for extreme distances. The mathematical aspects fascinated her, as precise shooting at long range was as much science as art. The first extreme distance exercise involved targets at 1,200 yards, farther than Sarah had ever attempted. The targets were human-sized silhouettes, positioned in a valley below the mountain shooting range, appearing impossibly small through even high-powered scopes. Target identification at this distance requires perfect optics and steady observation, Stevens noted, studying the target area through his spotting scope. Even experienced snipers sometimes struggle to distinguish targets at this range. Sarah made careful adjustments to her scope, accounting for the extreme bullet drop at 1,200 yards. At this distance, the bullet would drop more than 20 feet from the bore line, requiring significant elevation adjustments to compensate. She also had to consider wind effects, which became much more significant at longer distances. Even a gentle breeze that wouldn't affect shorter shots could push a bullet several feet off target at 1,200 yards. Wind is variable between here and the target, Stevens observed. I see different wind conditions in the valley than we're experiencing here. Sarah studied the wind flags positioned at various points between her shooting position and the targets. She could see that wind direction and speed changed multiple times across the bullet's flight path, requiring her to estimate the average effect rather than compensating for conditions at just one location. She took her first shot, and through the scope, watched the bullet impact about 2 feet low and 1 foot to the right of the target. Close, but not close enough for combat effectiveness. Good initial shot, Stevens encouraged. Adjust up 2 minutes and left 1 minute for the next round. Sarah made the scope adjustments and prepared for her second shot. Extreme distance shooting often required multiple shots to achieve hits, as the number of variables made first-round hits extremely difficult even for expert marksmen. Her second shot struck the target's center mass, achieving a hit at a distance that many experienced snipers struggled with. The satisfaction of making such a challenging shot was incredible, representing months of training and thousands of practice rounds. Excellent shooting, Martinez, acknowledged Instructor Williams. Hitting targets at 1,200 yards consistently requires absolute mastery of ballistics principles and steady nerves under pressure. The final week of sniper school brought comprehensive testing of everything the candidates had learned. They faced shooting tests at all distances, fieldcraft examinations, urban warfare scenarios, team coordination exercises, and academic testing on ballistics, tactics, and field procedures. Sarah approached the final week with confidence in her abilities, but also awareness that one poor performance could still result in failure after 9 weeks of intense training. The instructors made it clear that passing the final week required consistent excellence across all skill areas. The final shooting test included targets from 200 yards to 1,000 yards in various weather conditions, with time, pressure, and stress factors designed to simulate combat situations. Sarah would need to achieve 90% accuracy across all distances to pass the marksmanship portion. Working with Stevens, who had become not just her spotter but a trusted partner, Sarah began the final shooting evaluation. They had developed an efficient communication system and understood each other's strengths and weaknesses perfectly. The first targets were at relatively short distances, allowing Sarah to build confidence before moving to the more challenging long-range shots. Her accuracy was perfect through 500 yards, with every shot striking the center ring of the targets. At 600 yards, wind conditions became more challenging, requiring careful observation and precise compensation. Sarah's first shot struck slightly left of center, but still within the required accuracy zone. Wind shifted slightly, Stevens noted. Adjust right 1 click for the next target. Sarah made the adjustment and achieved a center hit on her next shot. Her training had taught her to adapt quickly to changing conditions rather than becoming frustrated with minor misses. The 800-yard targets tested her ability to make precision shots at distances where many soldiers struggled. Sarah had become completely comfortable at this range through months of practice, and she achieved perfect hits on 3 consecutive targets. The final challenge was a 1,000-yard shot, the maximum distance tested in the course. At this range, the target appeared incredibly small, and even minor errors in technique or calculation could result in complete misses. Take your time, Stevens advised. You've got this distance mastered. Sarah made careful calculations for bullet drop, wind drift, and atmospheric conditions. She controlled her breathing and heart rate, letting her body settle into the calm state that allowed for maximum precision. She fired, and through her scope, watched the bullet's impact at the distant target. Perfect center, hit at 1,000 yards, demonstrating the highest level of marksmanship skill. Outstanding shooting throughout the evaluation, announced Sergeant Major Thompson. Martinez, you've demonstrated consistent accuracy at all tested distances. You've passed the marksmanship portion of final testing. The fieldcraft evaluation required Sarah to plan and execute a solo stalking mission, moving unseen to within 300 yards of an observation post and engaging a target without being detected. This tested everything she had learned about camouflage, movement, and concealment. Sarah spent 2 hours moving through dense forest terrain, using natural camouflage and careful route planning to avoid detection. Her smaller size continued to be an advantage for concealment, as she could hide in spaces that would not conceal larger soldiers. When she reached her shooting position, she was completely invisible to the instructors searching for her location. Her shot was perfect, and she successfully remained concealed until the exercise concluded. "Excellent fieldcraft, Martinez," acknowledged Master Sergeant Rodriguez. "You moved like a ghost through those woods and established perfect concealment for your shot." The final academic testing covered ballistics calculations, tactics, equipment knowledge, and field procedures. Sarah had always excelled in classroom work, and she completed the written examinations with confidence in her performance. On the last day of training, Sergeant Major Thompson gathered the remaining candidates for final evaluation results. Only 6 soldiers had successfully completed all portions of the course, with Sarah and Stevens both achieving passing marks in every category. "Congratulations to the graduates of Sniper School," Thompson announced. "You've completed one of the most challenging military training programs in the world. You've proven that you have the skills, knowledge, and character needed to serve as military snipers." He called each graduate forward individually to receive their certificates and sniper badges. When Sarah's name was called, she felt a surge of pride and accomplishment unlike anything she had ever experienced. "Martinez," Thompson said as he presented her certificate. "10 weeks ago, many people doubted whether a woman could complete this course. You've proven that determination and skill matter more than physical size or gender. You've earned your place through performance, not politics." Sarah accepted her certificate and sniper badge with deep satisfaction. She had proven to herself and everyone else that women could excel in roles previously reserved for men. More importantly, she had become qualified to serve in a position where her skills could protect other soldiers and serve her country. As the ceremony concluded, Sarah thought about the journey that had brought her to this point. From shooting tin cans on her family's farm to becoming a qualified military sniper, every challenge had prepared her for this achievement. But she also knew that graduation from sniper school was just the beginning. Soon, she would receive her first assignment, where she would put her training to use in real situations with actual consequences. The proving ground was behind her, but the real test of her abilities lay ahead in operational assignments, where lives would depend on her skills. Stevens approached her after the ceremony, extending his hand in congratulation. "Outstanding job, Sarah. I couldn't have asked for a better partner through this course." "Thanks, Mike. I couldn't have made it without your support and partnership. Here's to whatever assignments await us." As they walked away from the training facility that had been their home for 10 weeks, Sarah carried with her not just a certificate and badge, but the absolute confidence that she could perform any mission assigned to her. She had faced every doubt, overcome every challenge, and proven that when they said females don't make marksmen, they were absolutely wrong. 3 months after graduating from sniper school, Sarah found herself on a military transport aircraft flying toward her first operational deployment. The rumble of the engines and the nervous energy of the soldiers around her created an atmosphere thick with anticipation and anxiety. This was no longer training. This was real combat where her decisions could mean life or death for herself and her teammates. The briefing packet on her lap contained classified information about her unit's mission in a hostile region where terrorist groups had been targeting civilian populations and military outposts. Intelligence reports indicated that enemy snipers were operating in the area, making it essential to deploy counter-sniper teams to protect friendly forces and civilian populations. Sarah's partner for this deployment was Staff Sergeant Michael Rodriguez, a veteran sniper with 4 previous combat tours, who had specifically requested to work with her after reviewing her training records. Rodriguez was known throughout the special operations community as one of the most skilled and reliable snipers in the military. "Nervous?" Rodriguez asked, noticing Sarah reviewing her mission materials for the 3rd time. "Focused," Sarah replied. "This is what all the training was for," Rodriguez smiled. "Good answer. I've read your training records. And I requested you as my partner because I believe you're one of the most naturally gifted marksmen I've ever seen. But remember, combat is different from training. The targets shoot back. The aircraft began its descent toward a forward operating base that would serve as their headquarters for the next 6 months. Through the small windows, Sarah could see the rugged mountain terrain that would become her workplace. The landscape was beautiful but unforgiving, with thousands of hiding places where enemy fighters could establish positions to threaten friendly forces. Upon landing, Sarah and Rodriguez were immediately briefed by Lieutenant Colonel Harrison, the officer commanding all sniper operations in the region. The colonel was a serious man who had spent his career in special operations and understood the critical importance of accurate intelligence and precise shooting in saving lives. "Welcome to the operational area," Colonel Harrison began, gesturing to a large map covering one wall of the briefing room. "We've been dealing with increased enemy sniper activity over the past month. They've killed 6 soldiers and wounded 12 more, all from concealed positions in the mountains surrounding our outposts." He pointed to several locations marked with red pins. "These are confirmed enemy shooting positions. Our intelligence suggests they have at least 4 trained snipers operating in teams, using advanced equipment and demonstrating professional-level skills." Sarah studied the map carefully, noting the terrain features and distances involved. The enemy positions were well chosen, offering concealment and multiple escape routes, while providing clear shots at patrol routes and base entrances. "Your mission is to provide counter-sniper operations," the colonel continued. "You'll work with infantry patrols to eliminate enemy sniper threats and provide overwatch for convoys moving through dangerous areas. This is precision work with zero tolerance for error." Rodriguez asked about rules of engagement and target identification procedures, critical information for ensuring that friendly forces and innocent civilians were protected during operations. Sarah listened carefully, understanding that making the wrong decision about target identification could have devastating consequences. That afternoon, Sarah and Rodriguez established their gear and equipment in the team quarters they would share for the deployment. Sarah unpacked her rifle, the same M24 system she had trained with, along with advanced optics and specialized ammunition designed for various combat situations. "Let's zero your rifle on the base range," Rodriguez suggested. "I want to confirm that your scope settings are perfect before we go operational." They spent 2 hours on the range, with Sarah firing groups at various distances to ensure her rifle was precisely calibrated. Her shooting was flawless, achieving sub-inch groups at distances out to 600 yards, even after the stresses of travel and adjustment to the new environment. "Outstanding shooting," Rodriguez observed. "Your rifle is perfectly zeroed, and your fundamentals are solid. You're ready for operational missions." Their first mission came the following morning. Intelligence reports indicated that enemy snipers were targeting a convoy route used to supply remote outposts with food, ammunition, and medical supplies. Sarah and Rodriguez would provide overwatch from elevated positions, protecting the convoy from sniper attacks while identifying and eliminating any threats. The movement to their overwatch position required a pre-dawn hike through rocky mountain terrain that tested Sarah's physical conditioning and her ability to move while carrying full combat gear. The weight of her rifle, ammunition, camouflage materials, water, and survival equipment totaled nearly 60 pounds, a significant load for someone of her size. Rodriguez set a steady pace that pushed Sarah to her limits but allowed her to keep up without becoming exhausted before reaching their destination. After 2 hours of climbing, they reached a rocky outcrop that provided excellent observation of the convoy route, while offering concealment from enemy observation. "Perfect position," Rodriguez noted as they established their shooting positions. "We can see 12 miles of road from here, and anyone trying to ambush the convoy will have to expose themselves to engage the vehicles." Sarah set up her rifle using the natural rock formations as support, creating a stable shooting platform that would allow for precision shots at long distances. Rodriguez positioned himself nearby with his spotting scope, ready to identify targets and provide accurate range and wind information. The convoy consisted of 6 heavily armored vehicles, carrying essential supplies to 3 remote outposts. The trucks moved slowly along the winding mountain road, vulnerable to attack from numerous positions in the surrounding hills and ridges. "Movement on the ridge to the east," Rodriguez whispered, studying the terrain through his powerful spotting scope. Possible hostile with a rifle. Range approximately 800 yards. Sarah acquired the target area through her rifle scope, scanning carefully for any sign of enemy activity. The terrain was rocky and broken, providing countless hiding places where a sniper could establish a concealed position. "I see him," Sarah confirmed, identifying a figure partially concealed behind rocks about 800 yards away. Appears to be observing the convoy route with optics. Through her scope, she could see an armed man studying the approaching convoy through binoculars. His position and equipment clearly identified him as a threat to the friendly vehicles below. Rodriguez used his spotting scope to confirm target identification and assess the shooting conditions. Confirmed hostile with rifle, clear target, range 810 yards, wind calm. Sarah made the necessary scope adjustments for the distance and settled into her shooting position. At 800 yards, she would need to account for significant bullet drop and ensure perfect accuracy to neutralize the threat before he could fire at the convoy. "Target acquired," Sarah whispered, placing her crosshairs precisely on the center of the hostile's chest. "Wind calm, clear shot, take him when ready," Rodriguez confirmed. Sarah controlled her breathing and squeezed the trigger slowly. The rifle recoiled against her shoulder, and through her scope, she watched the target react to being hit. The enemy sniper collapsed immediately, neutralized before he could threaten the convoy. "Target down, excellent shot," Rodriguez confirmed through his spotting scope. The convoy continued safely along the route, unaware that they had been protected from a sniper attack by Sarah's precise shooting. This was exactly the type of mission that sniper teams were designed for, eliminating threats before friendly forces even knew they were in danger. "Outstanding work, Martinez," Rodriguez told her as they maintained observation of the area. "That shot probably saved several soldiers' lives." 2 hours later, as the convoy completed its movement through the danger area, Sarah and Rodriguez began their own movement back to the base. The mission had been a complete success, with one enemy sniper eliminated and the supply convoy protected. Upon returning to base, they conducted a detailed debrief with Colonel Harrison, reviewing every aspect of the mission, from movement to target identification to shot execution. These debriefs were critical for improving tactics and sharing lessons learned with other sniper teams. Perfect execution of counter-sniper operations, the colonel evaluated. "Martinez, your shot at 800 yards, under operational conditions, shows that your training has translated perfectly to combat effectiveness." Over the following weeks, Sarah and Rodriguez conducted numerous missions throughout their area of operations. They provided overwatch for infantry patrols, eliminated enemy spotters and snipers, and gathered intelligence on enemy activities in remote mountain areas. Each mission presented unique challenges and learning opportunities. Sarah discovered that combat shooting required adaptations she had never experienced in training. The stress of knowing that enemy fighters were trying to kill her and her teammates added psychological pressure that even the most realistic training exercises couldn't fully replicate. During one particularly challenging mission, Sarah and Rodriguez were tasked with eliminating an enemy sniper who had killed 2 soldiers and wounded 4 others over the past week. Intelligence indicated that the enemy shooter was highly skilled and was using advanced equipment to engage targets at long range. The mission required them to hike 15 miles through enemy territory to reach a position where they could observe the area where the attacks had occurred. They carried minimal equipment to maintain mobility, but Sarah still found the movement exhausting in the thin mountain air. After 8 hours of careful movement, they established an observation position overlooking the valley, where friendly patrols regularly operated. The area was perfect for ambush attacks, with numerous concealed positions that could hide an enemy sniper. They maintained observation for 18 hours, taking turns sleeping while one watched for enemy activity. Sarah had learned to function effectively on minimal sleep, but the extended periods of intense focus were mentally exhausting. "Movement in the rocks at 11 o'clock, Rodriguez whispered, breaking the long silence. "Possible sniper position. Range approximately 900 yards. Sarah acquired the area through her scope, scanning carefully for any sign of the enemy shooter. The range was challenging, and the target area was covered with rocks and shadows that could conceal a well-camouflaged opponent. "I can't identify a clear target," Sarah reported after several minutes of observation. Rodriguez continued studying the area through his high-powered spotting scope. There's definitely someone there. But they're well concealed. We need to wait for them to expose themselves. They maintained observation for another 4 hours, testing their patience and discipline as they waited for the enemy sniper to reveal himself. This type of waiting was one of the most challenging aspects of sniper operations, requiring absolute stillness while remaining ready to engage instantly. There, Rodriguez whispered urgently. Target identified. Enemy sniper with rifle. Range 920 yards. Sarah acquired the target just as the enemy shooter was preparing to engage a friendly patrol in the valley below. The timing was critical, as she needed to eliminate the threat before he could fire at the unsuspecting soldiers. At 920 yards, this was one of the longest shots Sarah had ever attempted under combat conditions. She made careful adjustments to her scope, accounting for the extreme bullet drop and the light crosswind she could detect from studying vegetation movement. Wind 2 minutes from left. Target stationary, clear shot. Rodriguez provided the final shooting solution. Sarah settled into her shooting position, controlled her breathing, and placed her crosshairs precisely where her ballistics training indicated the bullet needed to strike. At this distance, there was no margin for error. She fired, and through her scope watched the bullet's impact at the distant target. Perfect hit. The enemy sniper was eliminated instantly, and the friendly patrol below continued their movement safely, never knowing how close they had come to being attacked. Outstanding shot under pressure, Rodriguez acknowledged. That was some of the finest long-range shooting I've ever witnessed. As their deployment progressed, Sarah's reputation as an exceptional marksman spread throughout the special operations community. Word of her precise shooting and professional performance reached senior military leaders, including some who had initially questioned whether women could perform effectively in combat sniper roles. During the 4th month of deployment, Sarah received an unusual assignment. A high-value enemy leader was confirmed to be operating in their area, and intelligence sources indicated he would be meeting with other terrorist leaders at a specific location. The meeting presented an opportunity to eliminate multiple enemy commanders with a single precision shot. The mission required Sarah and Rodriguez to establish a concealed position within 600 yards of the meeting site and wait for the target to appear. The challenge was that the meeting location was in a populated area where innocent civilians could be present, requiring absolute precision in target identification. They established their position before dawn, concealing themselves in an abandoned building that provided clear observation of the target area while keeping them hidden from enemy security forces. The waiting period could last anywhere from hours to days, depending on when the targets appeared. Remember, Rodriguez briefed her, positive target identification is critical. We need absolute confirmation before engaging, and we need to ensure no civilians will be harmed. Sarah understood the weight of responsibility she carried. This mission could significantly impact enemy operations in the region, but only if executed perfectly. Any mistake in target identification or shot placement could have serious consequences. They maintained observation for 36 hours before the targets finally appeared. Through her scope, Sarah could see 3 men meeting in an open courtyard. But she needed confirmation that one of them was the high-value target before she could engage. Rodriguez used photography equipment to document the meeting, comparing the individuals to intelligence photographs to confirm target identity. After careful review, he confirmed that the primary target was present and could be engaged safely. Primary target confirmed, center individual, range 540 yards, no civilians in area. Rodriguez provided the final shooting solution. Sarah acquired the target through her scope, noting his position and the clear shot angle that eliminated any risk to innocent people in the area. This was exactly the type of mission that required the highest level of marksmanship, skill, and professional judgment. She controlled her breathing, made final scope adjustments, and prepared for what could be the most important shot of her military career. The elimination of this enemy leader would save countless innocent lives and significantly impact terrorist operations. Sarah fired, and through her scope confirmed a perfect hit on the target. The high-value enemy leader was eliminated instantly, while the other individuals at the meeting fled the area. Mission accomplished with absolute precision. Perfect shot, target eliminated, Rodriguez confirmed. That was textbook execution of a precision engagement. As they moved to extract from their position, Sarah felt the satisfaction of knowing that her skills had made a real difference in the fight against terrorism. The months of training and the challenges of proving herself had led to this moment where her abilities directly contributed to mission success and the protection of innocent lives. The successful elimination of the high-value target earned recognition from the highest levels of military command. Sarah received a commendation for exceptional marksmanship under combat conditions, and her performance was cited as an example of the effectiveness of women in combat roles. Colonel Harrison called Sarah to his office for a personal meeting following the mission. "Martinez, I've been in special operations for 20 years, and I've never seen more consistently excellent marksmanship than you've demonstrated on this deployment. You've proven beyond any doubt that women can excel in combat sniper roles." Sarah appreciated the recognition, but she was more focused on continuing to serve effectively for the remainder of her deployment. She had proven her capabilities, but every mission still required her absolute best performance. As her deployment neared its end, Sarah reflected on the transformation she had undergone from a young woman trying to prove herself to a confident, experienced sniper who had demonstrated her abilities in the most challenging circumstances possible. She had faced every doubt, overcome every obstacle, and proven that skill and determination mattered more than gender or physical size. The deployment had changed her understanding of her own capabilities and her role in the military. She was no longer fighting to prove that women could serve in combat roles. She was simply serving as a highly skilled sniper who happened to be a woman. That distinction represented the ultimate success of her journey from the qualification range to operational combat missions. When they said females don't make marksmen, Sarah Martinez had proven them wrong with every perfect shot, every successful mission, and every life saved through her precision and professionalism. But she also knew that her story was just beginning, and her example would help open doors for other women who wanted to serve their country in whatever role their skills and dedication could take them. 2 years after her first deployment, Sarah stood before a room filled with military officers, defense officials, and members of Congress who had gathered to hear testimony about women in combat roles. Her chest displayed ribbons and decorations earned through 3 successful deployments, including 2 Bronze Star medals for valor in combat operations. Today, she would speak about her experiences, not as someone trying to prove herself, but as an established military professional with an exceptional record of service. The hearing room was formal and intimidating, with television cameras recording every word for national broadcast. Sarah had been selected to testify because her record represented concrete evidence of women's effectiveness in combat roles previously restricted to men. Her performance data spoke louder than any political argument or theoretical debate. "Sergeant Martinez," began Congresswoman Thompson, the committee chairwoman, "thank you for appearing before this committee today. Your record of service is impressive, and we're grateful for your perspective on the integration of women into combat specialties." Sarah had prepared extensively for this testimony, working with military lawyers and public affairs officers to ensure her statements were accurate and appropriate. But she was determined to speak honestly about her experiences, both the challenges and the successes she had encountered. "Thank you, Congresswoman. I'm honored to represent the many women serving in combat roles and to share what I've learned through 5 years of military service." The questions began with basic background information about her training and qualifications, allowing Sarah to establish her credentials and experience. She described her path from civilian to qualified sniper, emphasizing the rigorous standards she had met and the operational missions she had completed. "Sergeant Martinez," asked Congressman Williams, a military veteran who had initially opposed women in combat roles, "some critics argue that integrating women into combat units creates unnecessary complications and potential distractions. How do you respond to those concerns?" Sarah had expected this question and had thought carefully about how to address it honestly while supporting military effectiveness. "Congressman, in my experience, professional soldiers focus on mission accomplishment and taking care of each other. The soldiers I've served with have evaluated me based on my performance and reliability, not my gender. Combat operations require everyone to work together effectively, and that's exactly what happens when standards are maintained and leadership is strong." She went on to describe specific examples from her deployments, where her teammates had depended on her skills and where she had depended on theirs, emphasizing the professional relationships built on mutual respect and shared commitment to mission success. Congressman Rodriguez asked about physical standards and whether accommodations had been made to allow women to qualify for combat roles. This was a sensitive topic, as some critics claimed that standards had been lowered to promote integration rather than maintaining military effectiveness. "Sir, I completed the same training as my male counterparts, fired the same qualification courses, and operated under identical standards in combat," Sarah replied. "My shooting scores and mission performance are documented and speak for themselves." Military effectiveness requires maintaining rigorous standards for everyone, regardless of gender. The questioning continued for 2 hours, covering topics from unit cohesion to equipment considerations to long-term career implications for women in combat specialties. Sarah answered each question directly and professionally, drawing on her actual experiences rather than theoretical arguments. During a break in the hearing, Sarah was approached by General Patricia Hayes, the highest-ranking woman in the military and a strong advocate for expanding opportunities for female service members. General Hayes had followed Sarah's career with interest and had used her example in discussions with senior military leaders. "Excellent testimony, Sergeant Martinez," General Hayes told her privately. "Your performance record and professional presentation are exactly what we need to demonstrate women's capabilities in combat roles. You're helping to open doors for the next generation of female soldiers." Sarah appreciated the recognition, but she was more focused on returning to operational duties than on becoming a poster child for women's integration. She